Digress a little bit. We're going to take a one-day break from Sefer Yoshua. I want to talk about Bshvat, which is tomorrow, tonight and tomorrow. But I'm going to talk a little bit first about the halachic aspect of Bshvat, which sometimes gets de-emphasized. You know, many people have a minhag, many Sephardim, many Hasidim, and many Reform Jews. They have something called a Bshvat Seder that they make. As they say, it's very, very popular among non-Orthodox Jews, but the truth is it does have a makor in Kabbalah, the Talmidim of the Arizal, and the like. It is interesting that the makor for the Bshvat Seder, making even 4 cups of wine, etc., is really from a sefer called Chemdas Hayamim. And the Sefer Chemdas Hayamim is a very, very, very interesting sefer. Some people consider it to be Kodesh Kodashim, and some people consider it to be forbidden to read. Chemdas Hayamim is essentially a kind of a Kabbalistic sefer that talks about many, many different types of minhagim, al pi Kabbalah, to bring down certain divine emanations. And I believe the author is anonymous. We don't know who the author is. But among many Ashkenazic circles, the Chemdas Hayamim was considered to be a product of the followers of Shabtai Tzvi, the false Mashiach. So among many Ashkenazim, Chemdas Hayamim was considered to be an apikorsis sefer that is filled with allusions to Shabtai Tzvi, and therefore the whole Bshvat Seder, which comes from the Chemdas Hayamim, is tainted, and you're not allowed to do it. On the other hand, the Sephardim say that the Sephardim never had any negative Mesorah about Chemdas Hayamim, and it's considered to be a holy book, a reliable book, and many Ashkenazim say so as well. So the emes is, you might hear people tell you, oh, we don't do a Bshvat Seder because it comes from the Sefer Chemdas Hayamim, but the truth is, there are 2 answers to that. Number one, there are many, many Makairis that consider Chemdas Hayamim to be a very, very chashuv sefer. Number 2, and this is an interesting point, even if you let's assume a worst-case scenario. Let's assume a worst-case scenario that the origin of a Bshvat Seder is from the Sefer Chemdas Hayamim, and that's a tainted sefer. But it's still the case that many Gedolim and Kedoshim have adopted it, and therefore, even if the origin was no good, it now becomes something Kaddish. This is important. Something is not automatically tainted because it may have come from a bad origin. Sometimes things can be taken over, and things can be sanctified, and things can be elevated. Right? So number one, who says the Chemdas Hayamim is not a good origin? But number 2, even if it's a bad origin, Lamaisa, other Gedolim and Kedoshim have taken this minhag up, and therefore it's become liberated. I mean, I'll make a kal v'chomer from yoga, lahavdil. I mean, people say, oh, are you allowed to do yoga since yoga originated in Hindu types of worship and the like? But the answer is, it's become separated from that. It's now become exercise, relaxation. As long as you're not connecting it to that avodah zarah, you can use it, right? So if yoga can become kosher, kal v'chomer, something like Bshvat Seder, can become kosher, it can become freed and liberated from its origins. This is an important yesod. You can't always condemn a Jewish practice by connecting it maybe to an origin that was not so good, because if you see that tzaddikim have taken it up, that itself will lend it a certain measure of sanctity. Now, I'm not going to go over the Jewish, in fact, I'm not going to go over the Bshvat Seder. Ohr Somayach, in fact, has for Mechina a Bshvat Seder, which I'll be talking there, and the like. But I do want to talk a little bit about the halachic part of Bshvat, which often is not discussed, and I'm not going to talk about it at the Bshvat Seder either. And that is the idea that Bshvat is a Rosh Hashanah appears in the Mishnah. The very first Mishnah of Maseches Rosh Hashanah talks about the fact that there are 4 days of the year that are called Rosh Hashanah. One of them, of course, is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, which is our Rosh Hashanah. But the other is, Bshvat is Rosh Hashanah le'ilanais. Bshvat is the new year for trees. So first of all, what does the Mishnah mean when it says it's the new year for trees? And second of all, why would it be the New Year's of trees? So there's the what and there's the why. So the what is referring to the halacha of truma and meiser. So let's explain this. We know that in Eretz Yisrael, you have to separate trumos and meisres. The truma goes to the Kohen. Today we don't give it to the Kohen, but at the time when we were tahor and we had para aduma, we would give truma to the Kohen. Truma d'oraisa can be anything, even 1 grain, but midrabanan, it should generally be 2%. 1/50th of your produce you give to the Kohen. But then we have a meiser, a 10%. Now every single year of the Shemitah cycle, year 1 to 6, you give 10% of your crop to the Levi. Okay, that's called meiser rishon. But there's a second 10% that you separate, and what that second 10% is depends on the year of the Shemitah cycle. Year 1, 2, 4, 5. The second meiser is called meiser sheni, and it was brought to Yerushalayim and eaten. Year 3 and year 6, there was no meiser sheni. The second tithe was called meiser ani, and it would be distributed to the poor to be eaten wherever they want. Okay, so there's always going to be a second tithe, but year 1, 2, 4, 5, the second tithe is meiser sheni. Year 3 and year 6, the second tithe is meiser ani. Now year 7 is of course the Shemitah year. The Shemitah year, number one, you're not allowed to plant, but even the stuff that grows wild that you might be allowed to eat, Shemitah is pater from Trumas and Meisres. So Shemitah year, for example, if I have an apple tree, and my apple tree on Shemitah is hefker, anybody can come and take it. Anybody. You can go into my backyard and pick my apples. I'm not allowed to stop you. And the other bonus is that the apples can be eaten truma and meiser free. Okay, so there are no trumas and meisres on Shemitah, but the other years we have every year is truma, every year is meiser rishon. Year 1, 2, 4, and 5 is meiser sheni. Year 3 and 6 is meiser ani. Now, there is a very important rule that legabe the meisres of grains and vegetables, the year begins in Tishrei. So, well, okay, there's a lot of let me give you some more information about this. Given the fact that the second tithe will change from year to year, you need to know what year a crop gets assigned to. If the crop is a year 2 crop, you would give meiser sheni. If the crop is a year 3 crop, you would give meiser ani. So how do you determine if a crop belongs to a given year? So it's a little complicated, but there are 3 different rules. There's a rule for grain, there's a rule for vegetables, and there's a rule for fruit. Grain is assigned to the year when it reached 1/3 of its completed growth, because that's when it's considered minimally edible. Which means wheat. Let's take wheat. If wheat reached 1/3 of its growth, this particular crop, in year 2, even though 2/3 of it grew in year 3, and it was harvested in year 3, the appropriate meiser is year 2 meiser, and it would be meiser sheni, because grain is assigned to the year of what is called havoat shalish. Tavua is based on havoat shalish. Vegetables are assigned to the year they were actually harvested. So even if 100% of the growth of a tomato occurred in year 2. But I didn't harvest it till Tzom Gedalia of the next year, the 3rd of Tishrei. It's a year 3. So it's very different. Grain is Havas Shalish. Vegetables are Lakita. Lakita is actual harvest. And fruit is yet another test. Fruit, tree fruits, apples, oranges, pears, whatever it is, are defined by what is called chanata. Chanata, what's machlokas? Some say chanata is blossoming, and some say chanata is budding. Now, I don't know how many of you have been involved with fruit trees. I myself have not. But essentially, if you look at a fruit tree, whether it's an apple tree, a cherry tree, so the way fruit trees normally work is they produce flowers, and then at some point the flowers fall off, and then you have a bud. And that bud will be the genesis of the fruit that will grow. So chanata is either the blossoming stage or a little later the budding stage. So what that means is, once again, budding is the very beginning of the fruit growth, even though most of the fruit growth occurred the next year. And the fruit was harvested the next year. It will belong to the year of chanata. Okay, so this is rule number 1 to be aware of, that what year an agricultural product is assigned to depends on whether it's grain, whether it's vegetables, whether it's fruit. Grain is havas shalish. Vegetables is lakita. Peiros sa'ilan is chanata. Chanata. Now, the reason why it's important to know, there are actually 2 reasons why it's important to know what year a crop belongs to. Actually, 2 reasons. I only gave you 1 reason so far, but I'm going to give you another reason. Reason number 1 is the reason we already said. Is it a Meiser Sheni year or a Meiser Ani year? So I got to know. Year 2 is Meiser Sheni, year 3 is Meiser Ani. But you might think, if it's only a question of whether it belongs to year 1 or year 2, you might think that makes no difference what year it belongs to, because it's going to be Meiser Sheni in both of those years. But that's actually not true. Because there's another halacha by Trumas and Meiseres. You cannot give the produce of one year to cover the produce of another year. Let's imagine, for example, I have 10 bushels of apples belonging to year 1, and I have 10 bushels of apples belonging to year 2. And let's assume, so I have what? I have 20 bushels of apples. So my Meiser, let's say my Meiser Rishon obligation, which is the same for every year, would be 20 bushels. And I have, two bushels, right? Now there's 10 and 10, so my 10% would be 2 bushels. But I can't just take 2 bushels from the whole business. I got to take 1 bushel from year 1 and 1 bushel from year 2. I can't give apples of year 2 to cover year 1. I can't give apples of year 1 to cover year 2. This is called chadash and yashan. You can't be mafresh from new on old, and you can't be mafresh from old on new. Rather, old on old and new on new. So consequently, I have to know what year produce is assigned to, because only then I'll know what I'm allowed to take off for, right? In other words, if something is year 2 and something is year 1, even if it's Meiser Rishon, which is the same in every year, and even Meiser Sheni is the same, because year 1 and year 2, I still have to know the years in order to separate from the produce for that particular year. Okay? So there are 2 different reasons why you have to know what year something belongs to. One is the problem of chadash and yashan, And the other is the problem of Meiser Sheni versus Meiser Ani. Okay, everyone understands the general idea. Okay. So now, to make things a little more complicated, for grain and for vegetables, the year starts Tishrei, Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. So that would mean if a vegetable is harvested on the 29th of Elul, it belongs to the old year. If the vegetable is harvested the 3rd of Tishrei, it belongs to the new year. In the case of grain, if the grain reached a third of its growth by the 29th of Elul, it belongs to the old year. If it reached a third of its growth on the 3rd of Tishrei, it belongs to the new year, meaning all of the demarcations are based on Rosh Hashanah. With trees, it is very different. The technical meaning of Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanos is that for purposes of Truma and Meiser, the new year of trees is not based on our Rosh Hashanah of Tishrei. It is based on the 15th of Bshvat. So what that would mean is the following. Now remember, by trees we go according to chanata, blossoming or budding. If the apple tree budded, or actually it's fruit by fruit, it's not the whole tree, but any bud that budded before Tu B'Shvat belongs to the old year. Now, what that means is the following. This year is Tufshin Pei. But if a tree did not bud in Tufshin Pei Dalet, but it budded this year before Tu B'Shvat, halachically it belongs to last year. And that would be very relevant if it's a Meiser Sheni year, a Meiser Ani year, etc. Okay? So, Ilanais not only have a different criterion for what has to happen, what event is Koveya the year, it has a different definition of a year. Okay, so that actually means Chanata before Tu B'Shvat, it actually belongs to last year. Belongs to last year for Trumas and Maisras. And that will be relevant both in terms of Chadash and Yashan, in terms of combining it with fruit to take off Trumas and Maisras. And it will be relevant whether it's a Meiser Ani year or a Meiser Sheni year, if you're going from year 2 to year 3, or year 5 to year 6. In other words, let's take it meaning the following. If I harvest my apple in year 3, but the bud of that apple happened before Tu B'Shvat of year 3, it is treated as a year 2 apple, and the Meiser will be Meiser Sheni and not Meiser Ani. That is the halachic. I know it's less romantic and less Hasidic and less Kabbalistic, but that is what the Mishnah means when the Mishnah says Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah for trees. It's Lagabe Trumos and Maisras. Now, there's another very interesting application of Tu B'Shvat as Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanos, and this is a reference to the laws of orlah. Okay, so the first case I gave you was Trumos and Masros. The second case I'll give you is orlah. Now, what is orlah? When you plant by the way, orlah is very chomer because orlah applies, Trumas and Maisras only apply in Eretz Yisrael. Outside of Eretz Yisrael, there is no Trumas and Maisras. The law of orlah actually applies, Halacha l'Moshe Misinai, it actually applies even in Chutz La'aretz. So if any of you plant trees or saplings or the like, you need to be aware of the law of orlah. Yeah.
When we shop in the supermarket, how come in Chutz La'aretz, how come we're not worried about orlah?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So the Gemara basically says, the Gemara addresses it, the Gemara basically says that the halacha that orlah b'chutz la'aretz is aser is only if it's vaday orlah, not if it's suffik orlah. Meaning, unlike Eretz Yisrael, where you have to apply the rule that if you don't know if something's orlah, suffik da'oraisa, you have to be machmir. The halacha l'Moshe Sinai said that in chutz la'aretz, a suffik orlah, you're allowed to be makel. So you never have to be choshesh, maybe it's orlah, but if you knew it was orlah, you would not be allowed to eat it.
What's called being like suffix? Like maybe if we did a bit more research, we would find out for sure that it's not like it's the status is unknown. It's just not known to us.
Well, as I say, I mean, generally speaking, it's considered to be a minimal standard.
Also, batel like that is batel. Also
might be batel as well. That could also be true. Orlah generally is batel. It's nitring Shiur bittel. Orlah is batel not in 1 in 60. Orlah is batel 1 in 200. It's a special laws of nullification. But that could also be the case. Of course, that would work theoretically even in Eretz Yisrael, but that's why you have hashgachas. I mean, obviously, if you have a hashgacha on fruit, as you have here, that will cover your orlah problems as well. Now, what's the din of orlah? When a tree is planted, and it makes no difference if it's a seed. Very few people plant seeds today, trees, or a sapling. That's the more common way of doing it. You take a young tree and you plant it. So for the next 3 years, any fruit, and again, this is also totally on chanata, any fruit that budded within the 3 years of the planting, that budded, is orlah, and that fruit is forbidden to eat. In fact, it's forbidden to eat even after 3 years. Some people misunderstand that. Some people misunderstand orlah. They say, oh, orlah means you're not allowed to eat the fruit for 3 years. That's not accurate. Any fruit that budded within those 3 years is forbidden forever. The prohibition does not go off after 3 years. What goes off after 3 years is anything that buds after the orlah period is permitted. Anything that budded within the orlah period, or blossomed, depending how you define chanata, is going to be forbidden forever. Now, orlah per se works in a very funny way. Let me illustrate how this works. Because Bshvat comes in only at the very tail end of things. The halacha is that halachically a year is counted if as little as 30 days of the year applied. So this would mean the following. And this is another 15th that's going to be relevant. The 15th of Av, which we know is a happy day for a lot of reasons. But the 15th of Av is 45 days before Rosh Hashanah. Look at a calendar and count it. So the halacha is the following. If I planted a tree on the 15th of Av or earlier, meaning no later than the 15th of Av, then going to the 29th of Elul, that counts as year 1 for orlah. Why? Because Chazal say it takes 2 weeks till a planted tree takes root. 2 weeks. And then you need 30 days of being planted to count as a year. So not counting the day of planting, that means you need 45 days. You need 2 weeks, 14 days, plus 30, not counting the day of planting. So therefore, if you plant your tree on the 15th of Av or earlier, that counts as year 1. So year 1 of orlah is 15th of Av to the end of the year, even though it's only 45 days. Year 2 will be Tishrei to Tishrei. Year 3 will be Tishrei to Tishrei. So you've completed your 3 years, even though it's only 2 years and 45 days. You've completed your 3 years. Right, everyone's following? But the law of the 3rd year requires that you wait until 2 Bshvat. meaning to say, even after the 3 years have been computed, year 3 will not end until Tu Bshvat. Therefore, anything that budded before Tu Bshvat will still have the law of orlah. Now, you've still done less than 3 full years. Meaning, even with the Tu Bshvat calculation, if you calculate it, you have done less than 3 full years. But you've extended the orlah period by around, 5 Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, by 4.5 months. Okay? Now, let's consider this. What if I planted my tree less than 45 days before the end of the year? Let's assume I planted my tree Rosh Chodesh Elul. So it did take roots in the old year, but I didn't have 30 days of a planted tree. So here, the calculation of orlah is the following. I don't get the benefit of year 1. Because since I didn't have 30 days of a planted tree in that old year, that doesn't count. So the clock does not start until the Rosh Hashanah after my planting. And I got to go 3 full years. Tishrei to Tishrei is year 1, Tishrei to Tishrei year 2, Tishrei to Tishrei year 3. So here, the Ran writes, you don't have to wait until Tu B'Shvat, because the rule that for orlah you have to wait till Tu B'Shvat is only when you're utilizing the leniency of a short year. When you're utilizing the leniency of a short year in year 1, you're mechuyev to wait till Tu B'Shvat in year 3. But when you have to do a full 3-year count, then the law of orlah is not going to compel you to wait until Tu B'Shvat, and you're allowed to eat the fruit that is nechanat, that buds, right after the 3rd Rosh Hashanah. Okay, do you see the chiluk here? Okay, the truth is there are more complications. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but at least you understand the relatively complicated structure of Tu B'Shvat. Now, so this is the what. This is the what of Tu B'Shvat. But what is the why? Why would Tu B'Shvat be an important day? So the Gemara explains the following. The Gemara explains that in fruit trees, what happens is that the tree gets nutrients from the ground, and eventually there is a sap, kind of a rich juice, so to speak, that is generated within the trunk of the tree, and there are capillaries, like veins and arteries, so to speak, that bring the sap up to the branches, and from that sap is generated the fruit. So Tu B'Shvat is said to be the time of year in which the sap has risen within the tree. So even though it's quite amazing, you're not going to see fruit for a while. It's totally hidden. You're still in the middle of the winter. Tu B'Shvat is in the winter. Things look dormant. Things look unproductive. It looks like nothing's happening. But that's only on the surface of things. Inside the tree, something very amazing is happening. The life-giving sap has risen, and it's going to produce that fruit in a few weeks. The chanata is going to be in a few weeks, right? So Tu B'Shvat is not. I mean, I talked about theoretically if an Elon buds before Tu B'Shvat, but that's a theoretical question. In reality, it doesn't. In reality, it will normally bud after Tu B'Shvat. And that's why Tu B'Shvat is considered to be the Rosh Hashanah of Ilanais, because that is when the sap has risen. Now, Kabbalistically, there's important lessons here, because a human being is also compared to a tree. We are considered to be a tree as well, and Tu B'Shvat reminds all of us that even in our dormancy, even when it seems that we're not really accomplishing, within our neshamos, there is special kochos, special abilities. And Tu B'Shvat is a time when we are able to tap into the kochos that are within us and use those kochos to produce the peiros of Torah and Maisim Tovim and all of the good things that we're able to do. So Tu B'Shvat is kind of a reminder that appearances are deceiving, that sometimes it looks like we're going through the winter of our lives. Like, nothing is growing, nothing is happening. But in reality, within our neshama, there's a tremendous koach, and that's what Tu B'Shvat is supposed to remind us of. Now, the Chidushei Arim brings from the Talmud Yerushalmi a very interesting point. The Talmud Yerushalmi says, any tree that buds after Tu B'Shvat, which is the normal way it works, has produced its sap based on this year's rains. Meaning this year's rains produced the sap. If you had an early tree that somehow budded before Tu B'Shvat, it wasn't because of this year's rains. There wasn't enough rain yet. It was last year's rain. So the Chidushei Arim says, this is a very interesting lesson. The word Geshem, which means rain, is also a reference to every bracha that comes down from Shemayim. It's called Geshem. Your ability to learn, your ability to have parnasa, your ability to get married, your ability to have children. These are called Gishmei bracha, the rains of bracha. So the Chidushei Arim says a very interesting idea. He says, every Rosh Hashanah, I mean the regular Rosh Hashanah Tishrei, God decides what brachos you will get in the coming year. But says the Chidushei Arim, you don't draw on those brachos till Tu B'Shvat. Meaning, just as the Gemara says, the Yerushalmi says, any tree that buds before Tu B'Shvat is living on the rains of last year. He says, all of the growth that you have until Tu B'Shvat is based on last Rosh Hashanah, not this Rosh Hashanah. The brachos of the new year, you don't begin drawing upon until Tu B'Shvat. Now, the hope would be those brachos would be better, but they might be worse, meaning it'll be different. Meaning, until now, you've been living on Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Pei Dalet. Starting tomorrow, you're living on Rosh Hashanah Tafshin Pei Hey. And therefore, the Chidushei Arim says, a sensitive person will be able to be margish the difference in their ruchnias between before Tu B'Shvat and Tu B'Shvat afterwards. Because until Tu B'Shvat, it's the Geshem of the Shana Sha'avra. After Tu B'Shvat, it's the Geshem of this year. Yeah.
When the Chidushei Arim says this, is it just about the brachas of Rosh Hashanah don't come into effect on Tu B'Shvat, or does he mean all of the dinim that were made on Rosh Hashanah?
No, he seems to connect it to the brachos, to the gishmei bracha, right? Geshem is the siman of the bracha. Yeah.
If you planted a tree on Tzom Gedalia, would you have to wait till Bshvat in the
Yep. So that's an excellent. That's a very excellent machlokas. Excellent question. Let's assume a person planted a tree so early in the new year that it's before Tu B'Shvat, Tzom Gedalia, let's say. So I certainly get year one. So here's the thing. I vadai have to wait until Tzom Gedalia after the third year. But there is a machlokas, do I have to wait till Tu B'Shvat? Meaning, your question is a very good question. That is, what if I got 3 full years before I get to Tu B'Shvat? Do I have to extend it to Tu B'Shvat? Now, it is true that when I plant less than 45 days before, I get my 3 years without Tu B'Shvat, but that's because I got 3 calendar years. But where I didn't work with the calendar, I worked with my planting date. So there's a machlokas rishonim if you have to go to Tu B'Shvat. meaning you certainly have to go to Tzom Gedalia at least, but there's a machlokas whether you need that extension. Yeah.
Do we know when the holiday of Tu B'Shvat was first made?
Well, it depends what you mean by holiday. Meaning, in terms of the halachic implications of Tu B'Shvat, that's from the Mishnah. So that was very, very early. In terms of the festivity of Tu B'Shvat, that really dates from around the Talmidim of the Arizal. So that's talking about the 1500s. That's much, much later. We don't really see a clear indication that Tu B'Shvat was observed as a holiday or a festive day until that point. The only thing is, the Gaonim do write that you don't recite Tachunun on Tu B'Shvat. So there was some indication that it had a certain festive aspect. And of course, when Tu B'Shvat is a Monday or Thursday, I hate to talk this way, but we get I hate to say, I shouldn't even say it, but we get the bargain of not having a long Tachunun. Although again, that's that. Is that again?
Get 4 extra minutes to do something else.
Okay, 4 or 5 minutes to learn, etc. But people are always happy about not having the long Tachunun. But I'll tell you what, you don't like the long Tachunun, so the best thing is be mispalel for binyan beis hamikdash, because the long Tachunun is essentially tefillos, asking Hashem to take us out of Galus and to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. So, okay, you don't like the long Tachunun, be mispalel for the Geula Shlema, and then you will not have to say the long Tachunun anymore. Yeah.
So somewhere that there's even amongst Ashkenazim, you should eat more fruits.
Yes, so even though, that is correct, meaning the following: even those who don't have a Seder of Tu B'Shvat, it is brought down very definitely in halachic svarim that one should be mahader to eat peiros, and they should, well, Baruch Hashem, you're in Eretz Yisrael, so it's easier, they should be the peiros of Eretz Yisrael. So if you were in Chutz La'aretz, that was sometimes a challenge, but one should be mahader, and especially the Shivas Haminim. So even if you're not making a big Seder, but have something from the Shivas Haminim, yeah.
Would that predate the Talmidim of the Arizal?
I'm going to have to check. I believe that perhaps even that didn't predate it, but I'll try to check to see if that has an older source. Yeah.
Why did Tu B'Shvat come around?
I didn't hear you.
Why did Tu B'Shvat come to be? You said it was made as an official holiday in the 1500s. Why did it?
Well, the main idea of because as I say, the Mekubalim saw in Tu B'Shvat remazim to the human potential of growth, even in dormancy. So they saw this as a day of spiritual influences coming into the world. They also considered the following. They said that the whole chait of the Eitz Hadas was a chait in achila, right? Eating something that God said not to eat. So they saw Tu B'Shvat as a tikkun for the chait of the Eitz Hadas by taking achila and eating it l'shem shemayim. So it was a whole very complicated thing. It's a tikkun for the Eitz Hadas. It's a remez to the neshama of a person. The sap coming up are the hidden kochos of the neshama. And they saw what was going on in the physical world as symbolic of things that were happening in the spiritual world. So they invested with a great significance. So again, I want to point out that although the idea that Tu B'Shvat is a Rosh Hashanah for trees is in the Mishnah, but the Mishnah meant it in much more of a technical halachic sense. The spiritualization of Tu B'Shvat primarily comes from the Mekubalim. And by the way, I say Talmidim of the Arizal. I want to emphasize Talmidim, because the Arizal himself did not say all of this, meaning these are teachings more of the Talmidim. The Arizal himself, as far as we know, I don't know, but I'm not aware of the Arizal himself having a special observance of Tu B'Shvat. Yeah.
Were Chazal into Tu B'Shvat, or it's even in the time, even before, as soon as we came into Eretz Yisrael, we had already accepted it?
Well, our assumption is that when Chazal tell you Tu B'Shvat is Rosh Hashanah Leilanish, they weren't mechadash it then. This was a Messiah of Torah Shabbal Peh, that Tu B'Shvat is Koveya. So presumably that became operative as soon as we came to Eretz Yisrael. Yeah.
The idea of people making esrog jam from esrog.
Yeah. So again, this is brought down by the Mekubalim. Another thing that on Tu B'Shvat, because it's the Rosh Hashanah, God decrees the fate of the trees. So one should be mispalel that the coming year they should have a beautiful esrog. And there's actually, the Ben Ish Chai actually has a tefillah, beautiful tefillah, a long tefillah, praying for a beautiful esrog. Now, I understand that today maybe this seems like less of a major issue. I mean, Baruch Hashem, there are so many esrogim. But you have to understand, for a lot of Jewish history, when we lived in Europe and the like, it was not a done deal that you would have an esrog for Sukkot. It was very hard to get. The quality was compromised. That's why there were sometimes there was communities where there was like one esrog in the whole community that everybody had to share. So the notion that you're praying to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you should be zoichet to have a beautiful esrog, maybe is less, we feel less strong about it today. But for hundreds and hundreds of years, it was a major, major thing to daven for. And even today, many people have the minhag, and that's why they eat the esrog jam on Tu Bshvat. That's nichlal in their tefillah for a beautiful esrog. Yeah.
Which crops can be used for truma?
Which crops?
Yeah.
Well, all crops are chayiv in truma that grow in Eretz Yisrael. It's not just the 5 minim of Zagan. Corn, buckwheat, all of that is chayiv. Anything edible that is from the ground, anything that grows on the ground is chayiv in truma. Mushrooms, for example, are not chayiv in truma because mushrooms don't have roots. That's why it's shahakol. But anything that's oetz or adama or mazonos or hamotzi or hagaven, all of those things are chayiv and trumas and
Where
meisos.
does the idea come from? That it's just the 5 grains and wine.
No, well, there's a doraisa and a drabanan, meaning doraisa. The only thing that's chayiv in truma are the 5 species of grain, grapes, wine, and olives.
Oh.
That's doraisa. You're correct. But midrabanan, all gedulei karka are chayiv in trumas and meisos. In other words, basically, the truma on fruit is drabanan. That means all fruits other than grapes and olives would be drabanan, but it's still a chiyuv. Okay, be well.
Thank you for listening to this Ohr Somayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.